Welcome everyone. As we go Mechayil al Chayil from Shavuos straight into Shabbos Naso, and this is the special segment known as For the Shabbos Table for Parshas Naso, and you could learn it after Shabbos as well. Don't worry, it's very pertinent information, really pertinent for the whole year. So we'll start off. We learn about Nazir. And we know that if a Nazir becomes Tameh, he's going to have to bring a korban chatas. Now the pasuk says, "V'chi yomus meis alav b'pesa pisam." If the Nazir is walking and somebody suddenly dies, le'aleinu, v'tamei rosh nizra, he becomes Tameh. U'v'yayim hashmini yavi, he has to bring his korbanos, and echad l'chatas. One of them is a sin offering. So the Ibn Ezra makes a little bit of a cryptic comment. The Ibn Ezra says that the vasoidhu, and the secret over here is she'amru chazal uschar aveira aveira. The reward for an aveira is an aveira. Now, what is the Ibn Ezra saying? So the Sefer Ma'anei Achayim says, very accurately, that the Ibn Ezra is bothered. I don't understand. Why should he bring a sin offering? What did he do wrong? How could he have stopped somebody dying suddenly? A person has a massive heart attack, laying right in front of him, he becomes Tameh. What could he have done? He had no idea that would happen. Why does he have to bring a sin offering? So the Ibn Ezra says, Said Hadavar, the secret is because Schar Aveira Aveira. We know that Lo Ye'una L'Tzadik Kol Oven. Hashem will not do injustice to a tzaddik. Why should it be that he's a Nazir, that Hashem should strike him with a sudden tumah and defile his Naziris? Says the Ibn Ezra, it must be that he did another sin. And Aveira Gereres Aveira. And that sin led him to do this Aveira. And therefore, the chatas he's bringing is not for the sin of becoming Tameh. That's not his fault. How could he know that somebody will die suddenly in front of him and have a massive heart attack? Chas v'shalom. The sin is what led him, another sin that he did. That's why you have to know in the morning, on Shabbos morning, if you said something hurtful to your wife, you were over Einas Devarim, so that could lead to another sin when you get to shul, that you're talking during davening, or you tell somebody Lashon Hara, because Aveira Gereres Aveira, sin leads to another sin. Now, we must know that Meruba Midah Taiva Midas Parania is 500 to 1, and even more so, the case is that Schar Mitzvah Mitzvah. That's the famous story that happened by the Evan Pina, by the cornerstone of Yeshivas Chachmei Lublin, when Rameir Shapiro laid the cornerstone, which would be the magnificent binyan that he made for the Talmidim of Yeshivas Chachmei Lublin, the first yeshiva with a dormitory, with a modern kitchen, with a huge library. It was the first yeshiva of its kind, the model for all the sophisticated yeshivas that we have today. And one person donated the land for the yeshiva. And Rameir Shapiro said at the cornerstone ceremony, which was attended by thousands of people, the Heilige Church of the Rebbe was there, and Rameir Shapiro turned to the man that donated the real estate, and he said, I'm not jealous of you for this mitzvah, because you're getting so much honor over here for this mitzvah, but I am jealous of the mitzvah that you did that led you to be able to do this mitzvah. That's the big thing. When we do mitzvahs, we create a domino effect that leads to other mitzvahs. So, for example, a person gets up in the morning and he says the Moida Ani right away because it doesn't have Hashem's name, so he could say it even though he didn't wash his hands. And then he goes and he washes his hands carefully, whether the water is by his bed or he goes to the bathroom. He takes the cup in his right hand, passes it to the left hand, washes 3 times alternately all the way to the wrist, or 4 times. Then he takes some water and washes his face. This way he can likras alikecha Yisrael. He's preparing to greet Hashem in davening. He's making himself look nice for people, which is v'aftarech kamoicha. He watches his face where he's polishing the bust of Hashem, because the face is a tzelem elikim. So he's polishing the bust of Hashem. Then he puts some water or Listerine in his mouth, thereby making his mouth specially clean to say Hashem's name in davening. And then he comes out of the bathroom and he makes an alantilas yadayim and an asher yotzer and another kind of neshama. He puts on his talis cotton, and if it's his minig, he makes a bracha of tzitzis, and then he sees his wife and he gives her a huge smile and tells her to have a wonderful day, or if she's sleeping, he's very quiet not to wake her up. So you notice how many mitzvahs he's collecting. He walks out of the bedroom, he kisses the mezuzah. He's just done like a volley of 10 mitzvahs. He creates such an amazing inertia of mitzvah, gereres mitzvah, gereres mitzvah, gereres mitzvah, and therefore that creates a domino effect that goes with him through the day. Pasuk tells us, B'yom HaSheni, on the second day, Hikriv Nisanel ben Sur, the carbon of Nasiim of Nisanel ben Sur, Nasi of Yisachar, and then it says, Hikriv es karbanai. He offered his carbon. Now, by none of the other Nasiim does it say such a double language. It already says B'yom HaSheni, Hikriv Nisanel ben Sur, and then it repeats it, Hikriv es karbanai. Now, Rashi right away zooms in on this. Rashi tells us it's in honor of Yisachar. 2 things. First of all, like Ramosha Darshan says, it was Nisanel ben Surah's idea, the offerings of the Nasiim, and also it says at another time because of the fact that Yisachar is the Shevet of Torah, Uvenei Yisachar Yoidei Bina Le'itim. The Ksav Sefer says something interesting, and as I said, of very fundamental value. The Ksav Sefer says that since Nisanel ben Sur had the idea of the Nasiim, therefore he gets the credit for every carbon that each Nasi brought, because it was his idea. So he gets a part, he gets shares in everybody's carbon. So therefore, B'yom HaSheni Hikriv Nisanel ben Surah Nasi Yisachar, says the Ksav Sefer, the pasuk says that's when Hikriv es karbanai. That's when he offered his personal carbon. But you should know that every day he had a chelik in everybody's carbon because it was his idea. And this is the great idea that when you cause people to do something, you get shares in what they do. And that's why the Chavis HaVavos says, in Shar Ava, the Chavis HaVavos says that Shemi shegoyrim acherim la'aseh toiv, if you cause other people to do good, it says the Chavis HaVavos gadol ma'oid, that's very great. Shezichuyoysav hoileches misracheves, his schusim get bigger and bigger b'kol yom u'b'kol eis, every day and all times, al yedei zichuyoyseim shel elu shegorim lehem la'avodas Hashem, because he has shears, he has a part, he has a chelik in all those things done by all the people who he caused them to start doing good. This concept is the tremendous reward to be a mezakeh as a rabbin. I'll tell you something that Rav Zaychik brings down. He says in his Sefer Kol Sofecha or Tzefayich, he says that the Dubna Magid saw that there was a beggar that went around begging with a child. He took his son around, Nebuch, the 2 of them went begging together. and the beggar died. And now the son, there seemed to be no mother, the son was left alone in the world, and the Dubna Maggid took him into his home and raised him. And of course, if the Dubna Maggid raised him, he raised him, with Torah. And that boy turned out to be one of the Gdolei Adar. And that boy turned out to be none other than Reb Shlomo Kluger. And Reb Zaitchik writes, I don't know exactly how he knows this piece of information, but he writes that when the Dubna Maggid went up to Shemayim, maybe it was revealed to him in a dream, but when the Dubna Maggid went up to Shemayim, they said to him, they heralded him as a man who wrote 50 Svarim. Now, the Dubna Maggid said, look, I didn't write 50 Svarim. He says, yes, but you raised Reb Shlomo Kluger, and Reb Shlomo Kluger wrote 50 Svarim. Actually, he would go on to write 200 Svarim. The legend is that he wrote with both hands. And therefore, the Dubna Maggid was given credit for the 50 Svarim, because he caused it. That's a tremendous lesson when we do things that cause other people to do things. I remember this was a lesson that was seared into my young mind by the Boston Rebbe. I remember about, must be now 35 years ago, I was by an Aguda convention, and the Boston Rebbe, Zeif Tzadik L'Bracha Zchus Yagen Aleinu, was there, and he said that all idealistic young men that want to go into chinuch should come to Algonquin 11, and he wants to give us a message. So, of course, people like me, who were planning to go into chinuch, made a beeline to Algonquin 11, and the Boston Rebbe told us that it says that when Cain killed Hevel, it says, the bloods of your brother are screaming to me from the ground. So of course the question is, why does it say Dmei in the plural? Dam achicha. So Rashi says an answer that Cain didn't know anatomy, and he didn't know where to kill Hevel, and he kept on stabbing him until he hit a vital organ. So it's the bloods. But there's another answer, and that is that it's not just the blood of Hevel, but it's the blood of Hevel's children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren and great-grandchildren that you caused not to come into the world. So you're held accountable for all of them. At Seif Kal HaDairos. So then the Boston Rebbe ended with a flourish. And he really said, Meruba Mida Taiva Memidas Parania is 500 to 1. 500 to 1. So then imagine if you cause someone to do good, then you're going to get reward not only for their good, but also when they teach it to their children and their children to their grandchildren. You're going to get reward for all of that. I'll give you a personal example that I had. Some of you might have heard this from me already, but many years ago in Staten Island, when we lived on Rupert Avenue, we had a sukkah in our backyard, and behind us there was a sukkah from the lovely Jacobowitz family, Zish and Cheryl Jacobowitz. And from our sukkah we heard them bench together. And I said, this is really very nice. A family benches together slowly. And I started doing that with my family. We started benching together. And we started benching together for many years. And then I wrote my Sefer Power Benching, which, by the way, is just going into its 7th printing. I have copies of the hardcover edition, new copies of it. And if you want to order Power Benching, you could do so. 718-916-3100. It's $25 plus the 9-something priority shipping. If you want it, please let me know. You could text me. So I wrote in my Power Benching that it's a good idea to bench with your family. It gets them trained to say every word, and you could emphasize different things. Hazones, Hakol, Rachem Nashem Elokeinu Al Yisrael Amecha. And And I'm hoping a lot of people bench out loud because of that. So after 120, the Jacobowitz are going to go up to Shemayim, and they're going to be told, you caused people all over the world to bench out loud, and they'll say, we don't know what you're talking about. But it's because they benched out loud that I started benching out loud, and I started doing that with my family, and I put it in my power benching. So that's the way it is that you get the credit. And that's what it says in this week's parasha. Ish es kedoishav lo yiyeh, a man, his holy things is his. Ish asher yiten l'kayin lo yiyeh, a man that gives to the kayin, it will be his. Now, the Mikrei Dardike explains as follows. Now, of course, when you give the Meiser, that credit is yours, because we know what we give away, that's ours forever, right? So, Ishes Kedoishav Lo Yiyeh, that becomes his forever. But then it says, Isha Sheyitin L'Kayin Lo Yiyeh, this means, says the Mikrei Dardike, that if you give Meiser to the Levi, then the Levi gives Trumas Meiser to the Kayin. So, Isha Sheyitin L'Kayin Lo Yiyeh, that will be attributed to you, because since you gave the Meiser to the Levi, you generated him to give the Trumas Meiser to the Kayin. You're going to get a chelik, you're going to get a credit on that. This is the same idea, that what you do and generate, you're going to get credit for. I'll tell you a true story, mentioning another story. One time, my Rebbetzin Leah Shalom, myself, were invited to our friends David and Esther Vego. And it was a Friday night, and after Kiddush, he said very slowly and with a nice little sing-song way, Riboin Kol Ha'olamim. Now my minig was always to say Shalom Aleichem and Eishes Chayil. But as I'm listening to Riboin Kol Ha'olamim, since I'm his guest, I'm saying it also. And I looked at the words, and I said, wow, this is an amazing tefillah. And ever since then, I started saying it. So when I married my Rebbetzin, Shashi, she started saying it with me, together, very slowly. And some of my kids, married kids, started saying it. So after 120, David Vega will be told, you got Rabbi Weiss to say, let me look at you. He won't even know what they're talking about. And I said it for many years since then. He gets a chelik in each time that I said it. It's an amazing thing to be mezakeh as a rabbin, to cause such a domino effect. Same thing is true. Somebody sees you carefully kiss the mezuzah. Maybe he'll start kissing the mezuzah. Or you bring a sefer to shul, and in between gavra legavra, you're looking at the sefer, and he says, it's a nice idea. I'll buy a sefer to look at ben gavra legavra. You're getting shares in every time he opens up a sefer ben gavra legavra, because you gave him the idea. Doesn't take away anything from him. Uparas Raisha Isha, they uncover the head of the Saita. The Sefer El Yitzchak says something interesting. He says that we know that there's two famous psukim, Matzah Isha Matzah Taiv, or Matzah Aniyas Isha Ma'amavas, right? The Gemara says that they ask a person, Matzah or Matzah. Matzah Isha Matzah Taiv, or Matzah Aniyas Isha Ma'amavas. So the El Yitzchak says that the gematria of Ish is 306. The gematria of Ish is 311. If the Isha accepts that she's a little notch lesser than her husband, meaning that she respects her husband, as Ramila says, that she acts like the first mate and accepts that her husband is the captain. She looks up to her husband. Then that's Matzah Isha Matzah Taiv. But Matzah Aniyas Ha'isha is 311. That's the gematria of Ish. If she insists that she has to be treated equal, it's two captains, then that's Marmamavas. And that's Pshat Pora Rosh Ha'isha. Take off the head of Ha'isha. Take the hay away. Now, of course, the husband has to behave to deserve such respect from his wife. If he behaves like a brute, she's not going to be able to treat him with such respect. He has to earn it. He has to deserve it. And even then, he has to know that even when he's a captain, he has to respect his first mate. Like the Gemara says in Yavamas, "Umechabda yoyse migufa." He should honor her more than himself. If he acts that way, then she'll treat him as the captain. Yivarecha Hashem v'yishmerecha. So we all know that Rashi says Yivarecha b'mamayin v'yishmerecha min amazikin, from the demons. So it's interesting that the brother of the Maral, Zech Tzadik L'Vracha Zchus Yagan Aleinu, says that the gematria of Sam is the short for Samael. The gematria of Sam is 100, and the gematria of Lilis, the great she-demon, is 480. 100 plus 480 is 580, which is the gematria of Osher, wealth. Right? Ayin, Shin, Yud, Reish is 580. And that's why Osher has in it Yesh Ra. There is evil there. So Sam and Lilius is a mazikin. That's why we say Hashem should bless us with mammon, but protect us from Sam and Lilius, which is mazikin. Yara Hashem panav elecha v'chuneka. Hashem should shine His face upon you and give you grace. So the Medrash says, what's pshat v'chuneka? Chain. It says this is a request for Torah. Because Torah is livyas chain al roishecha. It's a garland of chain on your head. And that's what we say, this Yor Hashem, this light, is what we say in Sim Shalom, ki ba'or panecha nasata lanu Torah's chain. And of course, Torah is light, ki ner mitzvah v'Torah ar, and tal oira is talecha, it's the dew of or is your dew. That's the dew that will resurrect us in Tchias HaMesim from the schus of Torah. And now, therefore, the order is very good. Yivarech Hashem with mammon, with money, because derech eretz kadma la Torah. Im ein kemach ein Torah. Then Yor Hashem panav elecha v'chuneka, that's Torah. And then Yisa Hashem panav elecha v'yosem l'cha shalom, because Torah leads to shalom, as we all know. It says, Dracheh darchei noyam v'chol nesivos shalom. Hashem oiz l'amay yitein. Hashem yivarech es amay v'shalom talmidei chachamim ma'abim shalom ba'olam. I want to share with you one other great thought, but before I do, again, we want to ask the Olam. We do not have a sponsor for the main share next week. If you would like to sponsor, Ba'aloischa, 718-916-3100. That's 718-916-3100. rmmwsi@aol.com. And I don't know if I started in this year to say that this year is being sponsored by the Rubin family that makes this year possible. They give a grant for the Shabbos table, and we thank them. They asked that we should be mispal, that they should be zeichel to ben zachar, healthy mommy, healthy baby, and also to have hatzlach in ruchnius and in gashmius. But Yom HaSheni, on the second day, hikriv nisanel ben sur, the carbon of the Nesiim were offered by Nisanel ben Sur. So Ramban asks the obvious question. We know that there isn't an extra letter in the Torah. If a Torah is missing one letter, the Torah is puzzled. Every letter that's missing in the Torah changes everything, because there's all kinds of sequences in the Torah. Hafoit ba, the kulaba. And therefore the Ramban says, why are the Nesiim repeated one after another, the same thing? I mean, the Torah could have just said, simple, V'chein hikriv Nesiim, and so did the other Nesiim bring, Ish b'yoymai, every man in his day. Why did I have to repeat it over and over again? And the Ramban says succinctly a lesson that's really, really yisaidistic. The Rav Shach says the repetition of it so many times is to drive home this incredible lesson. Ki yiyeh kitzer b'kvayid acherim. Because by not saying each one's korban outright, expressly, it minimizes their honor. And we're very careful with the covet of others. The Sefer Oitzes HaTorah brings down an incredible story from the Rebbe Rav Hershel. The Rebbe Rav Hershel was young. He was engaged to a daughter of a great Nagid, a great wealthy man who was going to support Reb Hershel and his Talmidim, make him a yeshiva. They came for the Shabbos of the Ofruf. And he stayed in a house opposite, his future shver. And from his window, he saw the kitchen. And he saw that they were preparing a flat dough, which they were leaving to dry in order to cut it to make cookies or knishes, whatever they were making. And suddenly a chicken came in and started hopping all over the dough. And he saw his kala in a rage, grabbed the chicken just ruined the carefully prepared dough, grabbed the chicken and start smashing it against the wall. And he shuddered, and he said, how could he marry a girl with such achzarius, with such cruelty? How is that possible? On the other hand, what is he going to do? Break the engagement and embarrass the girl in front of everybody? He couldn't do that either. So what he did is he went into the Beis Medrash, and it was a busy Beis Medrash, and he made like he was surreptitiously stealing from the pushka. And one of the people that were learning caught him, and they hollered, and word got back to the shver that his chassan is a thief. So they broke the shidduch. This is what Reb Hershel did. So Reb Hershel brought scorn and busha upon himself, rather than be mevazeh this kala who he didn't want to marry because of Azarias. But that's the covet. You have to worry about someone, even someone who you don't want to marry because she's an Alzer. They say over a Maisa with Rabbi Issa Zalman Meltzer that Rabbi Issa Zalman Meltzer, before he wrote the Even HaOzel, he went out when there was a little danger of bombs. He went out to one of his brother-in-laws to ask him shot in the Rambam. When he came home, his family said why he went out. It was a little dangerous. So he said he wants to print in the Even HaOzel, and he has a shot from two of his brother-in-laws, and he couldn't leave out the third brother-in-law. It wouldn't have been Bakovidik. So he went to ask the third brother-in-law about the Rambam so he could quote from him as well. And I'll tell you one more ma'aser with Reb Chaim Oizer. Chaim Oizer, the great Reb Chaim Oizer, was walking with an entourage, and a man came and asked him how to get to a certain address. He wasn't from town. And Reb Chaim Oizer went out of his way a half an hour to take him to the place. So afterwards, his Talmidim asked Reb Chaim Oizer, you could have told him to go to the next landmark, and over there are plenty of people he would ask again. So Reb Chaim Oizer said that he saw that he was a stutterer, and every time he would have to ask, he would be embarrassed. And he didn't want him to have to ask a bunch of times. And therefore, that's why he went out of his way, the Gadol Adar went out of his way a half an hour in order that this person shouldn't be embarrassed. After we have the period of Svira, where we lost 24,000 Talmidei Rabbi Kiva mipnei sheloi kavod nagu kavod zel lezeh. We have to really be careful with the covet of others. Now, especially with the covet of our spouse, especially with the covet of our rebbeim, especially with the covet of our parents. We thank again the Rubin family. Remind you, if you would like to sponsor a share, 718-916-3100, rmmwsi@aol.com. If you're trying to get onto my Zoom daf yomi, they ask you for a passcode. The passcode is 914408. Thank you very much for joining us, and have a wonderful Shabbos.